I see you're all here today. I'm assuming you had breakfast, although it's getting to lunchtime and you have treats here. But you have to start to think about really where your food comes from. And it's not just Big Y or Stop and Shop or Guido's. It's the soil. So we're getting down and dirty when we talk about compost and decomposition. But the soil is the main ingredient to our survival. So we have to be aware of what we put in it, on it, around it, because it affects the soil. It affects the microbes that are in the soil, and you can see some pictures of some of the critters that may be in there that you don't see with your naked eye, but they are in there, breaking down everything to the nutrients that the plants need. So soil came about how many millions of years ago? We don't know, but it's basically from breaking down of rocks. You get sands, you get silts, and then you get some organic matter, dead things, leaves, bodies, animals, that sort of thing. And all this whole ecological system works very well together, breaking everything down where all the ingredients for plant growth are available to the plants, trees, flowers, and vegetables, whatever. So that's very important. And to keep this balance going, we who have our own backyards can deal with it on a smaller scale. Mary's going to talk about some of the more heavy-duty kind, but we also have some things that we can do in our own yard, and that is to remember there's a few tips about keeping a basic, good balance in your yard. And it's that old method of no-tilling now, just like was done ages ago. People put manure in the ground to feed their crops and grow grasses and things. And it was over time that we kind of got away from that, and it was basically after World War I and World War II, when things were getting pretty dramatic around the world, and also things were being invented and used, and that included chemicals. So the chemicals came into being. The farms, the small farms were disappearing. You had commercial farms, and they needed to have big areas with big machinery and kill everything that wasn't a corn plant or tomato plant or whatever. And all these things started to come back into the soil. Now, over time, they're realizing that this was not a good thing because it affects the soil, it affects the viability of the soil, the critters that live in the soil, that do the decomposing, and also the structure of the soil. Soil needs to get water in it. It needs to have air coming into it as well. So all this stuff is coming back into vogue, shall we say, and people are becoming more aware. So on a small scale, we can do our little bit for our yard, or if we don't have the yard, you can do a little composting for your house plants, or take a look at the farmers market. Support your local farmer, your local agriculture, because agriculture is our security. And the soil and water is the basis of that. And we can see now with all the weather that we've been having over the years, strange things happening, not only around the world, but also close to home. Flooding and all that, those disasters that we have. So that's part of the things that are changing. So we have to be aware of it and think a little deeper and look a little deeper in the ground, because there's a lot of interesting things going on. So you can see some pictures after about that. And now, Mary, with the heavy-duty composting.
Thank you, Linda. Everybody, thanks, Linda. And I know you just have such a wealth of knowledge, and you gave us just the spark notes on it. So please feel free to talk to Linda. I'm volunteering for her. She didn't tell me to say this. She has such a wealth of knowledge, even just on this table. Lots of nerdy stuff going around about soil. And so let's get into it. How can we increase the nutrients and the health of our soils just in our own home? Well, the secret is composting, which is not a secret. It's a tale as old as time. Forests compost on their own. every day, which is why the leaves don't build up. We don't have to rake the forest; they compost themselves. So let's apply that same wisdom of nature from nature in our own lives by composting at home. And I'm going to repeat a couple of the things that Linda said, and a couple of things maybe repeated throughout. At the end of the day, if you fell asleep, you were just here for the refreshments. There are some handouts on my table as well as handouts on the back table. So let's jump in. My name is not Tommy. My name is Mary. Tommy is my now 3-year-old. And when he was born, I always knew I needed to do something to help our community, the Berkshire community, do something measurable to not only fight against climate change, but to reduce our waste. And as you'll see in a second, composting is the number one thing that I can measure personally, that I enjoy measuring, as well as when you go to take out your trash after you start composting, you can see a sizable difference. So just an FYI, I'm not Tommy. My name is Mary. You can call me Tommy's mom. People do that all the time, and I respond to it. So feel free to do that. So as I was mentioning, organic material, which is anything that is used to be living, makes up about 31% of our waste. You'll see this number change from 20% to 40%, depending on which EPA site you're on or which composting site you're on. But 30 is about the average, and it doesn't really make sense to really argue about it because it's still a significant portion of our waste. So when I talk about organics, if I say organic, I'm not talking about pesticide-free or herbicide-free food from the store. I'm talking about things that used to be living, such as fruits, veggies, the fresh cut flowers on your counter from Valentine's, coffee grounds, and so much more. With composting, we are taking all of that valuable stuff that the plants took their time to create, so those nutrients, those vitamins, those minerals, for example, the pineapple top, we're taking those nutrients and we're essentially recycling them into soil to then use the soil again to regrow crops. If you're using it in your yard, you are supplementing your lawn, you're feeding your trees, you're making your lawn and your space a much healthier environment for anything to grow and to thrive. It also increases the ability of the soil to absorb moisture, which is why you'll see flooding a lot in areas where the soil is really dry, because it doesn't absorb moisture, it just goes through it. So with composting, we have a greener planet. However, when we throw our food away, like we say, hey, we're not going to do this, we're not going to do the recycling thing, etc., we're going to just throw it away. First of all, we get that stinky trash bag, which we've all had a stinky trash bag in our lives, and we never want that again. But it also contributes to climate change, because when it breaks down in landfills and it breaks down or it's burned in an incinerator, it creates methane gas, and it doesn't help our earth in any way. Those molecules have to come out somehow, and they are released as gases, which contribute to climate change. It's almost like a 200% difference. We either have a greener earth or a worse earth. There's no middle. So when we're composting at home, we enjoy a nice slice of watermelon. We put the rind in our countertop bin, or the bin underneath the wherever your bin is in your kitchen. We bring it out to the compost pile. The bugs do their job. We have that beautiful soil to plant crops again, or garden, or again, you can use, there's so many different uses. And then again, we can enjoy food that was grown in healthy soil. That's not the only thing we can do, obviously, in this grand scheme of waste. We can obviously reduce food. If you keep buying a loaf of bread but you don't eat bread, you're wasting food. If your husband or wife insists, I love chicken noodle soup, but they've never touched a can in their life, let's donate it. We can feed animals, like if you have chickens, or if you have a friend that next door that has chickens, communicate with them. You can feed animals with it. There are some farms that have pigs, and those farmers, find sources of fresh food, like restaurants and stuff, and they directly communicate to feed their pigs. Of course, we have home composting. Then we have industrial composting. Of course, if your food only has to travel, 20 or 100 feet, it's way more efficient than paying me to drive my big truck over to your house to pick up your compost. But of course, that's still way better than throwing it away. I also want to touch on wasted food for a moment. And if you need a link to these expired food facts, I have a tiny URL for you. Understanding date labels. So there are absolutely no regulations that say your yogurt needs to have a date label that says it's only good for 30 days. There are no regulations whatsoever. The only reason why they put a best by, use by, sell by date is because they need to know when they produced it so that they can tell which one is younger and which one is the older product. It has nothing to do with usability. We can kind of guess, though, how old something is going to last. For example, a box of cereal will definitely last more than 3 months past its sell-by date, but a yogurt less so because of just the nature of dairy, right? Cheese is the same way, about 7 days. Eggs can last at least 3 weeks, if not more. And you can always search on YouTube for a quick Google tip on how to know if your eggs are still viable for consumption. Soup cans, sauces, of course, 3+ months. Those containers are meant to hold that stuff for a long period of time. And of course, pasta, it's already dry. What is it going to get more dry? Like, we can keep it. So just an FYI, I mean, sometimes people are very, I'm this way with yogurt, especially if it's past the sell-by date, something tricks in my mind. I'm like, I don't want to eat it. But at least for our drier foods, our dry goods, we can absolutely keep them past the sell-by date. Just so you know, the only food that I think is actually mandated to have a sell-by date or a use-by date is formula, which makes sense because, babies, we got to take care of them. So when we're talking about home composting, we're going to avoid 2 major food groups. We're going to avoid meat. We're going to avoid dairy. So here you have my cartoon steak and cheese up there with an X. So we're not going to add those. We are going to add things like grains, nuts, fruits, vegetables, pastas. Depending on who you talk to, you can add your eggshells. If you are a lazy composter, don't add the eggshells. Because if you're not going to, and lazy is okay, it's better than nothing, but eggshells, they have you have to cook eggs in order for them to be healthy, right? Well, we're not going to cook the eggshells before we put them in our compost bin. When they go into our compost pile, they are going to heat up, but if you're not taking care of your compost pile, it's possible that the germs on the eggshells may persist, okay? So I say put them in, but if you're lazy or it's winter and you're not going to turn your pile, and we'll talk about that in a second, then you don't have to add your eggshells. Apples, coffee, basically anything that comes from a plant you can add to your compost bin. The reason why we're avoiding steak, or not just steak, but like meat, fish, dairy, is because not only is it going to create a different smell when it decomposes than, let's say an apple, but it's also going to attract these guys. Not that these guys aren't going to come for your leftover cauliflower, but if you have a cheese pizza in there or a cauliflower, guess what they're going to be looking for? Okay, so just be wary of adding those two. You can have a few different systems with your home compost bin. My preference is a pallet built one because I can take it apart, I can move the pallets around, it's easy and it's sturdy. I also have a ton of compost. However, today we have the New Age composter that's back there. This is also very easy, maneuverable. You can change the sizes. This is a great compost bin, and it allows air to go up through the bottom. We're going to talk about air in a second. And then you can buy some other styles online as well. So here's the major part about being a responsible composter. Okay? You want to add one part of your green material, which is your food waste, which is primarily nitrogen, and you want to add 3 times that in brown material, which includes hay, straw, wood chips, mulch, leaves, think, is it brown? Like, let's add it. I will say, though, be careful not to add, you don't want to add invasive plants, weeds, anything that has seeds that you don't want to germinate in there, because it's eventually going to turn to soil, and then those seeds are going to go, hey, I like this place, I'm going to start growing. Then your compost pile is a heap of weeds and invasives, okay? So 1 part green to 3 parts brown. If you're like, I can't remember that formula, again, plenty of free composting handouts for you to take home. All right, so now that I've talked at you for a while, I threw in a couple of surprise things in here into this test for you. So here we have seeds, orange peel, bread, a certified compostable fork, pasta, ketchup packet, apple, rose, cheese, banana peel. This is a paper napkin. I didn't actually, you know what, if you get that right, you just get extra points because I didn't touch on paper at all. And then we also have chicken wings left over from the Super Bowl. And of course, your kid or your grandkid came over with a snack with a plastic bag. So what are we going to do with each of these? And can you think to yourself for a moment which ones do not go in your home compost bin? Oh, wait. No! Okay. Dang it. Well, I spelled it for you. Okay, so did anyone blink at the same time that showed and want to tell me, anyone want extra brownie points today and tell me what does not go in your home compost bin? Yes? The fork does not go, and most of the time they say commercially compostable on it. You are not a commercial operation in your backyard. As much as you love composting, you are not at that status. I'm going to talk about that. Absolutely. Uh, you call Tommy's mom, but anybody else? So the fork is a no. The bag, absolutely. That bag, if you're out and about and you don't want to sort the food from the plastic bag, the plastic bag does not go in your compost bin, of course. It's not made of plants. Chicken bones, absolutely. We do not want to put those in. You, oh, that's pasta. Well, French fries can actually go in unless they're super greasy, but no one's gonna put a flag on the play if you throw French fries in your eat the French fries. Actually, you get eat all your French fries. Um, any other thing? The cheese. Okay, then the ketchup packet. Great. So we got them all. Cheese, the plastic bag, ketchup packet, the certified commercially compostable fork, the chicken bones. Great job, everybody. Yes.
I'm growing an amaryllis, and it said most of it is poisonous.
Okay.
So whether that's one of the plants that you don't have your cats around.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm not sure, but my amaryllis leaves to go in compost if it's poisonous?
When there's anything, for example, some people say don't add too much citrus. Like if you are juicing 100 oranges in a day, that's a lot of citrus for your compost. My rule of thumb is don't do too much at one time. Split it up, mix it with a bunch of other things. It will degrade. The poison doesn't like persist. Does that make sense? It's all of the molecules within, this is where my biology degree comes into play. All of those molecules within are going to break apart. They're not going to have the same efficacy 6 months down the road after they've decomposed. Does that make sense? And and hopefully that answers a question about like generally you don't want to add 100 orange peels all at once. You want to mix them up, fluff your compost, add a few more, maybe freeze some, add a couple in 3 or 4 months. Question?
Darn stickers on the produce.
Yeah. Well, I think at this very moment I have like a pile, like a sticker pile on my cutting board, on my sink, next to the trash can. Like, yeah, they stink. Yeah, don't put them in, obviously, because they have adhesive, which is like a chemical, and they have plastic, so you don't want to add them. They will likely persist in your home compost bin, meaning when you get your black gold at the end, you're going to find fruit stickers. Yeah. Yes.
Well, I had an experience with seeds.
Okay.
A wonderful, a plant that went all the way down the hill, the back
Mm-hmm.
of my house, of squash.
Yep.
Squash.
Yep.
Thank God they were organic seeds.
Right, right.
But
I've grown tomato plants out of I love seeing it because it verifies that I'm doing something that's natural and right. But if you don't want that to happen, you can crush them, you can grind them. If you like want to compost them, and this is getting like very very specific. But if you don't want anything to grow, you want your compost pile to look like a pile of dirt at all times that nothing grows on, then you can scoop the seeds out and throw them away.
Well, I figured out how to get around it. I just
Yeah.
spread the vines,
Uh,
and that became the compost heap. So,
Okay. There you go.
harvest, but I really learned a lesson about what growing things really is.
Hmm.
I never expected that, and so
Yeah, absolutely.
it was great. And they were delicious.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
bet.
yeah.
Pumpkins, watermelon, yeah, those seeds really, like I said, persist. Um,
I have a comment on
yeah,
orange peels or the citrus.
please.
The citrus, if you wash your citrus skin, the outside of it, and you can grate the zest, you can save the zest of the orange or the lemons or the tangerines or whatever you have and use them for baking, as an additive flavor. It does have vitamin C in it. And if you happen to have a wood stove, you can take your orange peels, pieces of it, and you can dry them. You can use them for other things, or you can throw them in your stove because the oils in the orange peels give you a little spurt to get your fire going. So that's another use of the orange peels. And then cutting up everything into smaller pieces, it's easier for the microbes to start digesting.
Yes, absolutely. If you can break any of these things down into smaller pieces, you will absolutely help your compost bin break down faster. Question?
Yeah, on the coffee grounds,
Yes.
filters are fine.
As long as the look for a compostable label on the packaging. If the filter is white, it is most likely bleached, which we don't want in our soil. Any other questions? Yeah.
Avocados.
Oh, like the pit? Oh yeah, throw them in. If you can crush them, great. But that's something that when you go to turn your pile, which we're going to talk about next, you're going to turn your pile, and they just may like last forever, and you just keep throwing them back in your compost pile. Eventually, they'll do something. It's kind of like tree branches. Like if you were to put some sticks in there, or if you were to put lots of wood chips into your compost pile, those things will not sift out. If you end up sifting your compost, they'll be larger for a while, but then they'll slowly break down. I don't think you might get an avocado tree. Oh, you did? You did? Um, yeah, you could break it apart. Yeah, smash it. Do you have an angry coworker that you don't like or something? Just like that could just be your weekly therapy session with your avocado pit.
Or you have a new
Um,
house plant.
or you have a new house, like have a whole line of avocado trees on your kitchen sink. It is important to turn or fluff your compost. I recommend every 2 to 6 weeks, just because air needs to get in order to break down your food waste. If the air doesn't get in, then it's kind of like you ever put wet bedding into your dryer, and then it's all dry and fluffy on the outside, and then you unroll it, it's like soppy and wet in the middle. It's just like that with a compost bin. You want to add air into the middle so that everything can break down and it doesn't become clumps of food waste and other material. Okay. I recommend 2 to 6 weeks. Some stuff says 1 to 3 months. If you're a lazy composter, it's never. But highly recommend 2 to 6 weeks. During the winter, your compost pile is not really doing much. You're not going to get faulted for if it's frozen. Obviously, you can't turn it, but especially when it's warm and you can move it around, get that air into the middle. Once full, move the bin into a new spot. So, for example, this is the new age, the brave new age. It's got 7 names. That black bin in the back, it has pins. You pop out the pins and you let go of the pile inside and you move the black bin and you set it back up right next to it so that one pile can cook. 6 to 12 months is about the range it takes for your stuff to break down. And by the way, I believe I skipped over this part. When we're adding this stuff, Oh wait, no, it's coming out next. No, it's not here. Where is it? This part. We want to layer it like lasagna, okay? Where you have your pasta and then your sauce, and then your pasta and your sauce. Oh, and there's cheese in there, but you know what I mean. We want to add the greens and the browns, and then the greens and then the browns. And then eventually you're going to have this huge layer, or all of these layers that you've fluffed over time. And then the bottom layer is your oldest layer, and that's going to be where you get your black gold, your compost from.
So you don't want to mix it? You don't want to mix the layers?
So you want to mix the layers, but I'm saying even still, like you don't necessarily want to put your old stuff on top. If you're mindful of space, if you have space, you can absolutely do this method where you undo your compost bin and move it, and then just let it cook. Is what is the term that we use for 6 to 12 months, but you will also know, like I have compost at the farm that breaks down in a month, but that's different because it's commercial. So generally speaking, 6 to 12 months, you'll know. You'll be like, this is soil. This is great. I made something. Yes.
You have to turn it while you're doing the 6 to 12 months once you've got it a pile out of the.
Yeah, not as often as when it's fresh. Once you start going with your compost, you're going to start understanding it more. You'll feel the outside of it, and there's more details in the handout. So please take the handouts for all these like specific tips. But if the pile is still moist and still fresh, you know that it's a healthy pile. If it's dry, or if it's like mostly brown material, you want to add more green. And it's a little game of finesse with adding the greens and browns. Again, if you're a lazy composter and you're just adding the greens and browns and leaving it alone, eventually it will turn into black gold. If you decided to add the bottom of the pile to the top, that's not going to hurt your compost. Actually, it'll add all of those nutrients and all those bugs that are breaking it down to the fresh compost and help that decompose faster. If your goal is to get as much black gold, into your garden as possible, you want these systems to be like, you want that black gold to be coming out sooner, and you're not going to be reusing it. But if you're not so concerned about adding it to your garden, you can absolutely add fresh compost. And by the way, there's a bucket up here. If you're ever wondering like what finished compost looks like, there's black gold in this bucket up here. But you can add it to the top of your pile, and again, add those microbes and all those healthy bugs to the new stuff. Yeah.
Do old pine needles count as brown material, or should we limit pine needles?
If it's brown, it counts as brown. If it's green, it counts as green. So in this scenario, like if you have fresh cut grass, it's green, it's still going to count as green nitrogen. If once the pile of old grass turns brown, then it counts as brown. So which is why we talk about green versus brown.
There's no problem with pine needles.
Yeah, I mean, you can add pine needles. That's fine. You don't want that to be your only source of brown though, because that's a lot of nitrogen, especially if they're, but now I'm picturing like underneath a pine tree it's just a blanket of brown. Yeah, absolutely add those in. But the more you can diversify your brown material, the more you can help diversify the nutrients in your finished compost. Does that make sense? So if you are a vegan and you never add, well, we're not adding dairy anyways. If let's say you love avocados and you eat avocado toast every morning and you never touch like grapes, watermelons, or apples, you're going to have certain nutrients are going to go into your compost pile, which is great. But if you had a more diverse diet, all those diverse nutrients are going to go into your compost pile. Yes.
Where do you find the source of the brown?
It doesn't just arrive at your house like unexpectedly. That's annoying. So, I mean, worst case scenario, you can go to the store and buy, a bag of straw or something. Plenty of times there's brown bags of leaves that people put out by their curb. You can totally grab a bag of leaves on their curb. They sit there for 8 months for some people. Most of the time, if somebody has bags of leaves that are in clear bags, that's a signal to the world that they're not treated with fertilizer or any chemicals. You can always knock on the door and be like, hey, notice you have clear bags of leaves on the curb. Did you use any fertilizer? No. Do you mind if I take a couple bags? And then you just have a couple bags of leaves. That's what I've done a couple of times when I had big piles at home. Mulch, lawn cuttings when they're brown, garden cuttings. Absolutely throw old plants in there. Yes. But it also depends on the type of wood, right? Like if we have a pine tree that went down, they chopped up that wood for us. Now we have a pile of pine wood, right? It absolutely could be too acidic. But you know, there's a lot of different types of wood. Obviously, like think of all the trees, and then yep. That's true. It is unknown. Absolutely. And you don't want to buy like a decorative bale of hay, right? Like, you know how you see them at the craft stores. We're not buying those, right? We're going to like Tractor Supply where they are buying the hay, you know, it's the hay for the horses or something like that. Something that's already meant to be healthy, untreated, etc. Hay would absolutely be good. Yep. Well, you do, of course, you have like the seed thing, right? So it still might have seeds in it. Um, what I'm going to say is I'm going to defer to the handouts in terms of recommending for browns, okay? But you can add, and you can always call me. I have all types. My number is on everything. So if you have any questions, email me. Even though I'm going to get into commercial composting in a second. Even though I'm a commercial compost lady, I tell people I'm your compost lady. Just talk to me. And by the way, I have a life outside of compost. This is not what I talk about to my friends. I'm part of a book club. Like I'm cool. But feel free to ask me about compost. Any questions before I move on?
Yeah, Mary, I was just going to say when you talk about mixing stuff in your bin,
Yep.
as we do, because we have a varied diet. So having that mixture kind of reminds me of our own bodies. We have our own microbiome that keeps us in balance. Whatever we eat for nutrition and our health, we vary that because we have to replace our body cells and keep our organs going. And the same thing is with this compost, the soil that you're making. You want to add a mixture of stuff so you get the nitrogen and phosphorus and minerals and things from other plants and all of that. So think of it almost as another body, a body system. We try to keep ourselves healthy. You know, we need water as well.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's dry, the compost bin needs a little water. And you're mixing different kinds of food as we eat different kinds of food for our own self as a human body, but kind of thinking it as the same. It's another almost a living form because you may have worms in there in your home compost bin, and you may have these critters that are in there helping to decompost.
Yep.
And we have critters too inside of us. So we won't get
Absolutely.
into those critters, but everything is held in a balance. So
right.
the more diversity that we have, the more of a balance that can be worked out between all the living parts of us.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's a reason why we're still not eating like we were when we were 20, right? That was not sustainable. So our piles need the same, you know, it's not pizza and coffee all the time. We got to have the diversity. So wherever you can get, honestly, if you had to pick one brown material to add to your compost bin and no other brown material, it would be leaves. Okay? They've been, you know, shining in the light of the sun. They fell from the tree. They still have some nutrients in them. They have so many natural, you know, bugs. When I say bugs, I don't necessarily mean like all of these crawling critters, but as well as like bacteria and all those microorganisms. So if you can get leaves, it's my number one recommendation. Yes.
What about weeds from your vegetable garden and your perennial?
I don't recommend it because they're just going to persist. If they were annoying before, they're most likely going to be double annoying after. Now, and that's because your pile is not going to get hot enough for long enough to really break them down and tell them goodbye. Okay, I'm going to talk about commercial composting, and you're going to see why in commercial composting it's different. Okay, so I'm gonna tell you about where you can bring your leaves or your weeds. Was there a second part of that question? Do it. You don't need a container. And I meant to say that before. You don't need a container. But for some of us, we're like, we want to feel like we're more clean about it, right? Or we might have a neighbor that's like, what are you doing over there with that pile of food? Garbage, right? Like I have a garbage neighbor. Like, no. So it's only if you feel inclined to make a container. Or if you have to mow, or if you have a very clean cut mowed yard, it's nice to have something to easily mow around, right? Yes.
Commercial product that I've been using, I buy it and I sprinkle it over with the composting as opposed to.
Nature will do its job and it does not rush and everything gets done. And I got that from a tea bag. So and I totally botched it.
My second question is putting brown stuff into the bags. If you're going to collect your own leaves, put them near the house so that you can go out and cover.
Yeah.
Right?
That's a tip I have. It might not be in here. Keep the brown material right next to your bin. So when you add your bucket, your little thing of food waste, you just lazy done.
Getting wet. Buying straw that gets wet.
I mean, your pile's gonna get wet. It rains. Moisture is great for the soil and for your compost. If it's a torrential downpour, you might want to put something over it so that you can still turn it if you need to turn it soon. If it's just like a sopping wet mound, then you don't want to like you want it to be moist. You don't want it to be wet. Do you understand the difference there in that it's a fine line.
I think what I was
Yeah.
thinking about was mold. What if something gets moldy, like leaves get moldy?
Well, what is mold?
Why? Break down too, but I'm just asking.
Well, mold, anytime I see mold, I'm like, thank you for starting that compost job for me. Okay? Obviously, we don't want it in our finished compost. So if you have like a top layer, just like dig it in and put it in the center of your compost pile where it's going to get the hottest and that'll decompose too. Yeah. Absolutely throw in your moldy bread, crust ends that nobody eats. Yes.
Would paper be considered brown?
That is a great question, and I forgot to mention it before. Paper can be considered brown. You can add newspaper. However, one of the quickest ways for a commercial entity to be claimed as not organic, like if you wanted to buy organic compost, if there's any red or black ink from like magazines or printed stuff, that it's instantly not organic compost if they see that it's in the like the feedstock, the things that are going to the commercial bin. So you can add newspaper. Newspaper is great for vermicomposting, which by the way, I'm not going to talk about indoor composting. The composting at home thing I have definitely talks about vermicomposting. You have worms? She's got the worms. She's red wigglers? Yeah, all right. So if you want to learn more about not going outside, you have a small apartment, you want to have like a little pet almost that breaks down your food waste for you, absolutely take one of those and talk to Linda.
It's another way.
Sorry?
Another
It's
way.
another way. There's so many ways.
Yeah.
When it comes to paper, if it's brown, it's most likely not bleached. You can add it in. White paper towels, do not add them in unless the package says whitened without bleach. Okay? I get a brand from Target. It's called Everspring. I use that personally because it's whitened without bleach and it's recycled. Cardboard can work. Just take off all labels and plastic. Okay? As long as it's just the brown paper. You can absolutely use cardboard. You don't want to feed it to your worms if you're doing vermicomposting though. Depends on the brand. Traditional Medicinals is my favorite brand. You can compost those tea bags. Usually look on the packaging and they'll usually gloat about it. You can compost our tea bags. But things like, is it Yogi tea that has like the pyramid shaped plastic? Harney's absolutely is plastic. There's like a Starbucks brand. Like if you went and got tea at Starbucks, it's a plastic. So if it looks clear, and it looks like it's made into a mold or a shape, it's most likely plastic, not plant-based.
Not a silk tea bag.
They say that they're silk, but they're plastic. Right. They get you.
Silk.
Yeah.
But are all paper
Generally speaking, like I think celestial is compostable. I used to know this. Like I think I just wrote about this a month ago too. Traditional medicinals, celestial. I'm not sure about yogi. I can't remember if they have the plastic, the silk ones or not. They're not? Okay. Absolutely loose tea you can compost.
So now you can try to do more loose teas, which
Absolutely.
gives you more tea flavor anyway. But
And we're just talking about the tea bag and not the little square package it comes in because those are lined with plastic to keep the tea dry until you consume it.
yeah.
See how nuanced this is? I didn't want to scare you with all this nuance, but put the food in, put the browns in, and then you're good. I am going to go, quickly, I want to talk about the free compost drop off in Lee. And here's the map. So you go to Big Y down the road from where we are right now. You go across the street, so you're not going to go down 102. You're going to go across the street on Tyringham Road, and then a mile, 1.7 miles, about 4 minutes. You're going to take a right, and Meadow Farm is right there. It's Meadow Street it's on, and you'll see that there's a Tommy's compost bin right there. I just provided the bin. It's a completely free drop off. It's an adaptation from we used to have a dumpster out there, and so there's a bin out there. You can put cheese, meat, and BPI compostable items in there. That's that compostable fork I was mentioning earlier. As long as it has the symbol on it or it says commercially compostable on it, you can throw it in there. If it does not have the certification on the packaging, don't trust it. It's probably from China. We are getting a new shed to make the system better. The shed's already made. We just have to cut holes in it, put up signs and flowers and make it pretty. So if you go there and all of a sudden there's a shed in that spot, it's the same thing. It's still a free drop off. What I tell people is if you're composting at home, which I highly encourage you do and try out, if you're having a turkey for turkey Thanksgiving dinner, you can still bring your turkey carcass here. You know what I mean? It's a significant amount of leftovers that you're not going to be able to compost at home. So this is free, definitely for Lee residents, and nobody polices it. So if you're from Otis or Lenox or something, it's just a free drop off. I manage the bin and then I bring it right into the farm where Tom Tupons, who's the farmer, he composts the rest. You can bring cheese and dairy in to this bin, and here's why. When you hear about industrial composting, now we're going to have a completely different picture of what's going on than what's going on in your backyard. We have piles taller than the tractors of food and brown material. It may not come through that clearly, but right under the scoop, you can see all of this steam. Can you guys see the steam? It almost looks like smoke. That is how hot the piles are. You touch it and you burn your hand. They're 130 degrees on average. Does that help? Can you guys see that better? So this is why we can take the cheese, the dairy, the meat, the compostables at the industrial composting farm. This is just like nature recreated in very big amounts. So when you compost if you go to the drop off, you're adding to these piles. This is Tom driving the tractor, turning the pile over, introducing air to new parts of the pile, and he turns them on a regular basis. This pile isn't even a month old, but you can't even recognize some of the things they've added because of how fast the compost process is at a large scale. So when we do industrial composting, we can add the moldy cheeses, the fish bones, the compostable products, and then we add lots of carbon material. We get lots of it from lawn companies, tree companies, residents. Over time and with management, it becomes the black gold compost that if you ever bought from Meadow Farm, that's what you're buying, is all of that finished. So this is a great representation of what it takes to turn those large piles. And he's got at least 4 going at all times. During the summer, it's like 6 or 7 because of how much food waste I'm bringing to him. Unfortunately, but unfortunately, it's a lot of management. Right.
Bringing too many tree branches is what changed the whole picture on the
Okay, so the dumpster that was outside of the farm was only ever meant for food waste, but people would show up after hours. You can bring your brush in to Tom. There's special spots for brush, which is tree branches, bushes, and stuff like that. But people were abusing the food waste dumpster as a lawn waste dumpster when it wasn't ever meant to be that. So which is why we downsized to a Tommy's compost bin. And we're gonna have 2 bins in the shed at all times, so we can handle high volume. But then we're gonna say, all yard waste has to go to Tom at Meadow Farm during his business hours, leaves included. Like there's a special spot for those. If you are at home and you like do cuttings on your bushes, you can add them to your home compost bin. But like I said, they might persist, and you just have to keep adding them to your compost. Eventually, they will disappear. Um, if just a little snapshot of what I do for my work, my customer, whether it's a commercial customer that uses a large garbage bin, or a commercial or a residential customer that uses a 5 gallon, just like the one up here, what they do is they put their food waste in the bin. I empty it on a schedule, whether it's weekly or every other week. For commercial customers, I have one customer I see 4 times a week. They have so much food waste. I empty it into my truck. When you see the Tommy's truck, it's me, and it says Tommy's mom on the window. So just wave. And if you have kids with you, ask me to honk because I got some fun horn noises for you. What I do is I partner with a few different farms for the composting. I can't bring them all to one farm, and I try to go as local as I can. So it doesn't make sense to travel to Lee when I'm composting food waste from Dalton. And then, of course, that soil is used to grow crops, which we might see again at our farmers markets, which we can then compost again. So this is the cycle of Tommy's compost if you were to use my service, residentially or commercially. And of course, I can accept all of those things in your bucket because I'm using the industrial composting. So I can accept, the compostable soup bowl from the cafe. I can accept the eggshells without question, the compostable cups and the meat and the dairy and everything, unbleached paper products. So that's what I do full time. My job today is not to convince you to use me because, of course, like I said in the beginning, the best way to compost your food waste is at home. And then, of course, you have your drop off in Lee that you can use if you want to, compost the cheese and the dairy, and the meat. So that was a lot of information at you. I planned for 20 minutes and it's been 55. So, I am happy to answer any questions. We can turn off the screen.
Mary, just one more thing.
Yes.
About your compost
Absolutely.
container at Tom's.
Yeah.
At Meadow Farm. Sometimes I go and dump things in and I see people are using plastic bags to put their stuff. Even sometimes they're compostable, but sometimes they're not.
Right.
And then I tend to wrap it in newspaper if I have a lot of things. Is that okay to do newspaper?
Newspaper is great. And what I think when I see plastic bags is someone's really trying to do the right thing, and it's unfortunate that we don't have the signage, which is why the new shed is going to be awesome, because it's going to say like food only and da 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 and say all the pretty things, and it's going to be like compost shed #1 in the country.
Any composting we want to bring to your containers, then we can just wrap it in newspaper and dump it right in.
Absolutely. And it's not, you can actually put it in a plastic bag and then just don't leave the plastic bag because the plastic's not food. Some of us might have really nice cars. My truck is disgusting. Of course, because of my work that I do. But if you don't want to put, potentially leaking something in your car, you can put it in a plastic bag. BPI compostable bags are also fine. Sometimes that confuses people who don't know the difference between a plastic bag and a green compostable bag. You can also freeze it too. Freeze it, and then when you bring it, it's not dripping, right? Peter?
You mentioned BPI, maybe you ought to just dive
Sure.
in a little bit.
Yeah. So BPI stands for
Biodegradable products and
Biodegradable Products Institute. I knew that by myself. I didn't need any help. Um, so, and I couldn't remember if P stood for products or plastic. But essentially, these products are made from PLA, which is polylactic acid. If you've ever heard of lactic acid, you might have actually heard it from sports. Like when you're working out, you have that burn. That's lactic acid. Lactic acid is a natural product of living things. And what they do is they take different types of plants like beets, beet starch, cornstarch, and they heat it up and then they put it into a resin that is a fork or a cup or a soup bowl or something like that. In order for us to know if it's really made from plants, BPI certifies it. Okay, so a lot of the time people search on Amazon, they try to save a few bucks by going with something that says certified compostable, but it doesn't have BPI on it, which anybody can say I'm certified. You know what? I'm 29 and I have $1 million in my pocket. Like you can say anything you want, but it's not true. Okay. So make sure it says BPI compostable on it to know that it's friendly for our soil and our farms. Thank you for bringing that up.
On that same topic, now we know we can't do the forks and, the good forks and the good bowls and soup things. But what about those green bags? It's like, I
Yeah,
line my composter with it to keep it.
absolutely.
Can they go in my home?
So if they're BioBag brand, anything that is the 8-gallon size or smaller is home compost friendly. And I have some in my car. My truck, if anybody wants to know what I'm talking about, I can rip off a couple of bags so that you know what to bring or to look for. It's just BioBag. It's the most popular brand out there for compostable bags. They are the most persistent, even in industrial composters. But again, if you rip them up or if they're deep in the pile, you keep putting them in the pile, they'll break down.
What about those ones you get at Big Y to put your produce in?
The green ones, because they're leaving.
Are they the BPI compostable ones?
I think so.
Very flimsy. Those bags that Big Y has, and I really need to check, Lee has a plastic bag ordinance that requires those bags to be biodegradable, compostable. Their bags came from Crown Poly, and Crown bags were certified by the European Certification Agency, not BPI. But the Europeans are stricter than the Americans are on all sorts of stuff.
Absolutely.
If it's certified non-compostable by the Europeans, you can trust it.
Yeah, great. I'll also add biodegradable is no longer a trustworthy term. It must say compostable and it should have a certification on it. There's also TUV Australia, same deal as BPI, just a different certification process. Usually it'll have all of them on it. If it's a really good company, they'll just get certified everywhere. Biodegradable now just means that it breaks down. It used to mean it breaks down into the environment and like is bio-based. It's plant-based, it's life-based, but it no longer means that. All plastic is technically biodegradable because it can break down. Right? So
In 50 years.
in 50, 100, but also it only breaks down into smaller pieces of plastic. It's not like we don't want to put our toothbrush or our saran wrap into our compost bins because then we're basically going to be growing with that as a. All right, any follow-up questions for me? I'm going to be sticking around, so you don't have to rush right now.
So I go to the co-op and I get my little takeout thing. That's
Yeah.
compostable. But it's not going to be compostable in my home thing, and I don't want to drive all the way to bring it to your shed, your future shed.
Yeah.
What do I do with it? Do I put it in the trash? What do I do with that thing?
If it's so, there are certain ones that are like paper, like they almost have like a paper look to them, and they're not shiny. Yeah, so you can throw them away. I mean, you're not going to contaminate trash, right? Unless it's hazardous waste, which this is not. So you can throw it away. You can kind of save it, right, for that time you are going to go to Lee to the drop off. You could sign up for Tommy's Compost and just sign up for like once a month plan if it's so significant of an amount. But yeah, Yeah.
Change your diet, I guess.
I know. So are you talking about the Berkshire Co-op? Oh my God, their hot bar is like, oh, I love their hot bar. So, yes.
I can say something about it because I'm a lazy composter.
Okay.
So I take some of those things. I don't have a lot of them, but I take them and I just stick them in there anyways.
Yeah.
And then I just keep throwing them back in. And eventually they do.
They do. They do. It's just like a branch,
Yes.
right? It'll eventually break down. But some people don't like to see it again. They're like, oh,
Yeah, yeah.
do the job, break down. Yes.
So I would like to have a little lazy composter, so I wash my eggshells or zap them in the microwave.
Oh, there you go. Zap them in the microwave. I like that. Do they pop or do anything funny in the microwave? No.
So I crush them first.
Crush them. Absolutely crush them. Those could also persist. The shells could also persist, and you have to like compost them once or twice.
And the other thing is seeds, especially from any kind of melon or squash. Chickens love them.
Yes.
Don't throw them in the garbage. Find somebody. Find some chickens.
Yeah. When I had chickens in a compost bin, I never had black gold because they kept scratching and like doing all the things and getting all the stuff out. So, yes.
So I kind of discovered with the eggshells that just take your thumb and spray a little liquid detergent or something in there, and you can wash that little like tip where there's that egg in there, and you can wash it clean. And
Yeah, you can.
throw it into the compost.
You're not a lazy composter, are you?
But I realized when I thought I could put the eggshells in
Yeah.
the compost, it made it smell bad. And
Oh,
I
that
thought,
could happen,
I don't want
absolutely.
that smell. So I
Yeah.
just thought, well, they're sitting there in the sink anyway, so I just started taking a little liquid soap and that cleans them up and
Yeah,
they compost.
absolutely.
There's another part of that is I started rinsing my shells as well and just crushing them up so they're smaller pieces. The other thing, I think, if you wash them nicely and keep them in a container, I think they're good to sprinkle around to keep the slugs away
Absolutely.
because they're a little bit sharp, eggshells. They'll degrade eventually, but it may deter, the slugs.
For chickens, if you ground them up and they're clean, you can give them to chickens as their and as an alternative to oyster shell, right?
Yeah. Calcium, right?
Calcium, absolutely. Peter?
We feed our dog a raw diet.
Yeah.
And I was listening to a call-in show with a vet, and they said if you feed your dog a raw diet, add eggshells to it. So
Interesting.
our eggshells go to our dogs. Break
There
them
you
up with the raw food.
There's lots. I mean, if you Googled it, there's probably 100 different ways that you could use an eggshell. But for me, if I have an eggshell and I'm cooking, I'm just celebrating that I'm cooking. I mean, my 3-year-old, he doesn't want just a PB&J. I got the reverse. He wants like gourmet meals. Yes.
Is there such a thing as a bear-proof compost?
Bears are lazy, so they're going to want to go to wherever the food is free. However, if you do a good job of burying it, they're most likely not going to go to your bin. They don't want dirty food. They just want easy food. They're going to go to your neighbor who isn't composting and knock over their trash can before they go into your compost bin and have to dig through dirt. As someone who lived in Hinsdale up against many, many, many acres, I never had bear problems. I only ever had raccoons and squirrels and stuff like that. And I'm like, it's okay. Take the apple core. Like, it's fine. Peter?
We live near a conservation area in Lee that has deer, bears, we heard coyotes recently, and our compost bins are just made out of wood. They're open. We've been there for 10 years with them. Never had a bear go in compost. Don't have squirrels go in the compost. The bears go after our garden, but they don't go after the compost.
Yeah.
So shouldn't be that big a problem if you put the right stuff.
You're not going to attract more bears. In fact, because it's not easy food, like if your garbage cans are outside, you're going to actually deter any bear presence that you might have because it'll be covered with dirt versus just in a plastic bag that they already know how to grab and run with or grab and open. The bears at my house, if someone does throw something into the trash, like somebody just doesn't know that. Well, how do they not know? I'm the compost lady. But anyways, let's say, I don't know, something on there has like a food residue, like a pizza box or something, they grab the bag and they run with it. I've never seen it again. So bears would rather that, you know, than go in your compost bin. So, and you're not gonna suddenly have a bear problem. If you've never had bears, you're not gonna have bear problems with a new compost system. Yes.
I learned the hard way. When we moved, my husband and I moved here, we went and bought one of the really nice metal ones that
Yeah.
first we had to tie it to the house because the bear would come up and just tip it over. And then eventually we came out and the cords attached to the house were ripped and the whole bin was picked up and thrown down the hill. So we gave up. We got it piled.
Mhm.
And I never walked out the door and run into an animal. So I can only attest in
There you go.
mistakes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But also it's hard with the ones that turn, that stand up. It's hard to add the appropriate amount of browns to them, or to be honest about how many browns you're adding. With those, however, if you do choose to go with one of those, it does have a window. Some of them have locks on them. You can use a 5-gallon bucket with wood chips, and the wood chips act like dryer balls, and so it'll help keep air in the bin. I've talked a lot today. I will not have a voice later. Usually I'm just like singing in my car, in my truck. Yeah.
I will add about the animals. We have one of those bins here on display, and the chipmunks do like to chew a little hole so they can get in, and I considered them, you know, fluffers because they get in.
Absolutely. They're training it for you.
So I knock before I
That's, yeah.
because just once I opened that cover and like I was surprised and they were surprised. Jumped out and it
Yeah.
was like, boy, I don't want to do that again. But they actually took some of the butternut squash seeds and they planted them elsewhere. And so then all of a sudden you had butternut squash growing down this little area of the lawn. It was pretty funny.
So you're all becoming farmers, free farmers. Yeah.
Might get some help from the chipmunks.
Yeah.
So composting is making your own nature's circus.
Yeah. We're just playing with nature and nature's having a laugh with us.
Yeah.
Is there anything you wanted to add at the end? And then
Just to, what I have over there. But having a compost pile, I mean, I've had the bins for years, and that works well, and stirring it up. And you can really feel the heat, even in the wintertime. If you get your fork in and just right in the center, you can feel the heat that's being produced in there. But also, a lot of times, if you are cleaning a yard and you have a lot of perennials and annuals and kind of brushy things, we've made a big pile. And like, oh God, how long is that going to be there? Not very long, but without doing anything too much other than poking at it here and there over the whole summer. Again, it was the summertime, but you can see that pile go down, and you can see our earthworms, and there's other, microbes, I'm sure, with doing all the work that they do. So it does break down, and if you're not too fussy about your plants, I've had some really nice vegetable plants come out of my compost pile on the edges. You can get your tomato plants, your squash, your watermelons, whatever, but save those. Those are plants, those are already been feeding off of your soil there, so they're pretty special.
they're very happy. They're very happy.
They're happy there, and if you don't mind them, wandering this way or that way, growing, I would say keep them and, tend to them.
And one last tip I have is that you said that you buy something commercially that you add to your compost to kind of get it boosting. Is that?
The idea that it comes in a small bag. And you
Yeah,
can
just like a dusting.
create the heat or something like that.
So,
I saw it on TV gardening program.
okay.
PBS.
And I'm not hating on it. What I will say is that another cheap, free way to do it is to talk to somebody who's already composting and say, hey, can I have like a jar or a small amount, a bag of your finished compost? That finished compost already has all the happy stuff in it, and it's obviously not as condensed as what you buy online, but it's already natural and ready and going to help jumpstart your new compost. Yes.
What about ashes from your fireplace?
Mixed feelings?
I have mixed feelings because you can use them for a lot of things. Like certain bushes, or if you're a gardener, certain bushes like the ashes by the roots. Um,
You want to be careful. If you know what your wood is.
yeah.
If you know what your wood is, and make sure there's no, plastic things or.
Here's the thing. It's not good food for microbes. You know what I mean? You can add it, but like you might discover that it slows your pile down in terms of decomposition. It's not that it's not like natural byproduct, right? Because it's old wood, right? But yeah, just be careful because your pile is living, as we talked about.
I heard it was good for lawns though. Like if you sift it onto your lawn, like you
Yep.
would lime. Like
So just Google it. I don't have expertise in that, so I don't want to mislead anybody. I know it's good for some bushes, but Google it before you apply it. That's all I say, so that you don't say Mary told me to do this thing. Yes, right here.
Oh.
So jumping worms opens a can of worms. So you'll know when you have them.
What are jumping worms?
Jumping worms are an invasive species of worms. And basically, you can cut them in half and then they regrow, right? And so
they would die over winter. They can't take the cold. That's what I understand. But they would leave their little seed packets around. They are very aggressive, shall I say? They stay closer to the surface, not like our traditional earthworms. And I should say, there are many species of earthworms. So,
so they fight out the worms. They fight out the bugs we want, and I'm talking literal bugs like the creepy crawly thingies. They overpower, just like every other invasive. They take over. They decimate other populations, and they don't do the same job as what we want, which is our natural species in the area.
Yeah. How do you get rid of them? I heard they don't like oak leaves. So leaving, if you have an oak tree and the leaves, that's one thing that you can do to keep them out of the forest. But
I will say that jumping worms opens another can of worms, and that I do want to respect everybody's time. Until you have them, don't worry about them. But don't accept, like if you're going to accept new compost from somebody, it's nice, or soil or anything from any producer. Do you know if this has jumping worms in them? Have you ever had jumping worms? Is this near your jumping worms, etc.? Because sometimes once you get them, it's like you got it. So just be mindful of wherever you get soil or compost from. Like I said, borrow finished compost from a friend. Just make sure they don't have jumping worms. Go ahead.
So you're implying these worms can literally, if you put that soil on your garden, you could just.
No, you have a problem. Just all it takes is a couple, and then that's game over.
Can you put manure in on a compost pile?
How much are we talking?
I don't know, but
So you don't want any carnivorous manure. So no dog or cat manure. And you can put manure, but we're talking large scale that you want it, because it's got more bugs and stuff from going through a digestive system.
Seeds, maybe seeds from different grasses.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So you just want to be mindful. So if you have horses or cows and stuff like that, things that are vegetarian by nature, then you do want to have a separate pile. Make sure that's cooking. Like there's a special formula for that, just because of the higher risk of what they could be adding to your pile. Yes.
Our organic gardener and composter passed away a year ago. So
I'm sorry to hear that.
Inheriting his garden and compost piles.
Yeah.
Should I assume he has one finished compost pile and one pile that was sort of in process?
If it was a year ago and no one's touched them, they're all finished. They're all ready, because it's been a year.
New compost pile, and just I can mix the two together. And
absolutely, yeah.
a lot of black gold to start with.
There you go. Okay. Yeah, and you can mix some of that finished stuff with your new pile too.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
And just to mention seeds too, we can have one packet of bean seeds here in the room and give everybody one of those seeds, and you go home and you plant it. That bean plant or that that crop that you'll get may be different. Each one of you may have a different taste for your bean. And they call that the terroir. The little microclimates that you have, Pat, in your yard, or you have, Joan, in your place, the climate that's there, the soil that you have, that bean seed, when it sprouts, it's going to be sucking up everything that you have. And it may be different than what Pat has.
Mm-hmm.
So the taste of the vegetable or fruit will be slightly different. And that's what actually, I guess, wine started with one vine, and then wherever you're France or Italy or whatever, and then grafting started, and then you get more variety. So it's just something to keep in mind for your garden, to rotate your crops too. You might
Yeah,
want to
absolutely.
plant things in one place one year and then put that same crop in a different area. Mix it up and make sure you keep your soil, I don't know, clean, I suppose. Rake it up, but don't dig it too much. It used to be the whole thing was double digging the
Yeah.
soil and all of that kind of thing. And now it's gotten to the no-till method. Just scratch up what you
Absolutely.
need for planting and tend to that area. The more you dig, the more you think you're getting the weeds out, you're also disturbing that soil and the weed seeds that are down in there. So they'll be back up anyway. So it's just keeping the microbes that are down there in a sympathetic environment where they're doing their job and not being disturbed by us humans too much.
Peter?
I recently read a book called No Big Gardening, and one of the things that we always used to do, but we're not going to do anymore, is when you're pulling your plants out at the end of the season, just cut the stalk. Don't pull the roots out.
Yep.
Keep it as a cover crop to save soil. Doesn't blow away, doesn't wash away. To keep your soil always covered with something. That's
Now the eggs, so all eggs, like farmer's eggs and store-bought eggs, you should wash them or put them in the microwave before you put them in the compost? I've never done that. I'll just put them in the microwave. What's the meaning behind it?
Is it salmonella or is that chicken? Salmonella? Yeah. E. coli. Well, E. coli is mostly in stool, but is it in eggs? But anyways, when in doubt, popping them into the microwave for a couple of minutes just to have peace of mind is, you know what I mean?
So you crush them down and then put them in like that?
That's what she said she does. Yep. All right, I'm going to be around, so if you were shy and didn't want to ask a question in front of everybody, that's totally okay. And
I have a little treat.
what is your treat?
I think you could see my apron made by Janet McKinstry, winner for our local people. Beautiful flowers. Okay, poetic license perhaps. They're not a real species, but wouldn't you love to have some pretty flowers or some delicious vegetables from your garden? So compost is one way that we can do it. We could make a statement now doing this process. And we talked about the commercial, we talked about the bins, and there's the other way, and I'll let you see the little red wiggler worms when you come up here after. But these little guys that are dirty, down and dirty, doing their job, and they are the ones that are letting us have the beautiful flowers that we see above ground. So you have to appreciate what's going on down there, and you have to appreciate the soil because that is what sustains us. And considering the climate and things, disasters that are happening around the world, food is a real essential question. And how are we going to maintain a healthy environment to grow food to feed the population? And so it could start with us practicing in our own backyard.
Absolutely.
And so if you want to do the little worms in the kitchen, that's fine. It works. These are borrowed from my very good friend. I was just babysitting them this weekend. I don't have them. I just have a pile in the back. So you can take a look at them if you like. So again,
and these are like the worm that you would use in vermicomposting that just break down so fast. You do have to treat them like a pet. You do have to like put in water, newspaper with spray it with water to make sure that they have the water, like a watering bowl, but not watering bowl. So they are like a pet, but they do their job like in an apartment or a small space.
And if you don't have a garden, it's not a problem. If you're doing this internally in your house, you'll have some soil, some compost, which you can add to your house plants.
Absolutely.
So
No weed seeds.
why wouldn't you add these worms to a composting bin?
Oh, this is for an interior bin. I
You-
wouldn't
They're
add them
sensitive to the
to
cold?
They are sensitive to the cold.
these won't. The other interesting thing is about composting worms. On the trail, the Appalachian Trail, we started in the early 1990s, as they did in Vermont, is setting up compost bins instead of outhouses. And it was called a moldering privy. And not to get into too many details, because you have other questions, but it was a two-stage structure, like an outhouse. At the one side, you had some duff from the forest, and the other side was left empty. So the seat and the business part could shift from one bin to the other. When one side got full, you shifted the seat to the other side. In the meantime, that compost there with the duff from the forest would compost all the human waste that was in there. And then that could be scooped out and put back into the forest. When we started that back in the early 90s, we were getting wiggler worms from Cape Cod to start that process. But the worms, they don't survive over winter anyway. But we found that just using sawdust and the duff from the forest was good enough. So that's a process that works, and it's now pretty much standard on a lot of the trails. So beware, there is a traditional looking outhouse, but it's a little bit more
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for your attention.